Good afternoon, friends and fellow Toastmasters. So today I've been given the opportunity to share with you a few things I know about evaluation. And hopefully we all can become better evaluators and help more people in our organization become better speakers in the long run. So allow me to share my screen as we start with our evaluation workshop this afternoon. All right. So this workshop covers the what's and the how's of evaluation. For us to truly know how to deliver effective evaluations, we have to first understand what it truly is. All right. So we have to remember evaluation is synonymous to feedback. Therefore, it can be described as an information about a reaction as a basis for improvement. Given that description, evaluation then would basically mean we react to a performance or a speech, and from there, the speaker and the audience will be able to gain information from your reaction as a basis for improvement, as a basis to help them become better speakers in the future. Now, effective feedback or effective evaluation only comes from a credible evaluator. So who then is a credible evaluator? Is it just the distinguished Toastmasters? Is it the tenured Toastmasters in your clubs? Is it the champions? Well, truth be told, friends and fellow Toastmasters, the credible evaluator is simply you. Each and every one of us, no matter how long we have been in the organization or how far we've reached in our Toastmasters journey, we can all become credible evaluators. And for you to take on and accept the role as an evaluator, you should embody being a credible evaluator. And it basically doesn't take much. So let us describe, what does it truly take to become an effective and credible evaluator? So first, all we need is the basic knowledge of a public speech. All we have to know is a basic structure. For any of us, or for most of us who have done our icebreaker speech, you would remember that the purpose statement would be for the member to introduce himself or herself to the club and for the member to understand the basic structure of a public speech. So for as long as you've written and delivered your icebreaker speech, received feedback from an evaluator, and tried applying it onto your next project, you've basically just ticked off the first one. It's as easy as that. But there are two more. The second thing that we need to become an evaluator or effective evaluator at that is ears. The beauty about evaluation is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to be the one who has the sharpest ears. Active listening is truly important in evaluation. You have to go beyond what is being said and truly listen. Listen for the message, listen for the thoughts and intent of the speaker, and listen to basically what the speaker wants us to gain from him or her. So again, you don't have to be the smartest, you just have to have the sharpest ear. And the third thing, and the most important of all, is the heart. You can be the best evaluator out there, but without the heart to truly help out fellow Toastmasters in their Toastmasters journey, then the evaluation would be a flop. You have to genuinely have the heart to help others out, improve, to help them out become better speakers. Because friends and fellow Toastmasters, Evaluation is not here to prove how good of a speaker you already are and to showcase your talent. No, it's here to help the speaker and the audience. It's here to help them grow and help them improve. So that's that. You don't need much to become an effective and credible evaluator. To be credible enough to deliver your evaluation, you just have to have the basic knowledge of a public speech, the sharp ears to truly listen, and the heart to genuinely help out fellow Toastmasters. Now, say for example, you feel like you've checked all three and you're ready to become an evaluator. So your vice president of education called you to evaluate a speech and you find out you have to evaluate a pillar from your club. Has that ever happened to you? Because it definitely did for me. When our vice president for education told me, you're evaluating next meeting, I was ecstatic. I was ready. But when I saw the program and I was evaluating a distinguished Toastmaster, I immediately had this reaction. How dare I? How dare I evaluate distinguished Toastmaster Ernie Limkake? He is our coach and our mentor. Who am I to tell him what to do? How dare I? But because the program was already there, I had no other choice. But later on, I realized as I was listening to his speech, taking note of the purpose of an icebreaker and what I got from it, I still noticed I apparently have a few things to share. So I dared. And friends and fellow Toastmasters, you can too. You can dare to evaluate even the best speakers in the world. Why? How effective the speech was for you is all that matters and nothing else. As I said earlier, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't even have to be the best speaker in the room to deliver a feedback or to deliver an evaluation. Because ultimately, it depends on your perception and how effective it was to you is all that matters. You are not delivering an evaluation speaking for the audience. You're delivering an evaluation speaking for yourself as a recipient of the message given by the speaker. Okay. So now that's about it. That's all it takes to be credible enough to become an evaluator. So I'm pretty sure all of us here in this meeting room is credible enough already. Now, credibility is there. Next thing on the line is to know what to look out for. There's so many things that we can consider in trying to prepare for a feedback. But ultimately, we have to be smart enough to pick out the right things. If this was a competition, we have a very short amount of time to prepare. So we have to be smart enough to pick out the right things, smart enough to know what to look out for. And here are a few things that we should know. First is the C, which stands for content. Next is the O, which stands for delivery, organization rather. And the D, which stands for, as I said earlier, delivery. You have to know the content, see the organization, and witness the delivery for us to be able to take in or to take out a few points for us to discuss in our evaluation speech. And we'll take these on one by one. So first, content. What do we need to know about the content? So a few Toastmasters doesn't really want to touch on the content because as they say, the content of the speech is the speaker's own and we cannot change their story. We cannot change their experience. We cannot change their message. And that's true. When we look out for the content or when we try to evaluate the content, we're not evaluating what the experience in the story was. We're not evaluating how good of a story that was. We are evaluating rather how effective that story was in delivering the message that the speaker intended. So, what to look out for the content? Was the purpose of the speech met? So, our primary job as an evaluator is to see if the speech project or the purpose of the speech has been met. So, as we all know in our speeches that we deliver in the meeting, we have our purpose statements or project objectives in the case of the old educational system or the legacy program, rather. So, we have to deliver our speeches following a certain objective or project. And for you to be an effective evaluator, you have to take those purpose statements to heart because that is your basis of how effective the speech was. Say, for example, as I said earlier, purpose of an icebreaker is for the member to introduce himself or herself and for the member to learn the basic structure of a public speech. And that's just that. So you ask yourself, was this Toastmaster able to introduce himself or herself to me well enough? Do I know this? Do I feel like I know this person well enough already? Or was the structure of the entire speech effective enough? Or did it follow the basic structure of an introduction, body, and conclusion? And that's it. You don't have to stray too far away. Focus on the purpose at hand. You might wonder though, what about for contests? We don't have a purpose statement for the demo or the test speaker. Well, here's the good news. Any form of speech, maybe in Toastmasters or outside of Toastmasters, any form of speech has four, or any kind of speech has four main purposes. And we just have to pick out one. A speech can be intended to inform, as is the scenario here. My entire speech this afternoon is to inform. Second is to entertain, as is the case for a humorous speech. Third is to inspire the audience. And fourth is to motivate or persuade. Either of these is the case for our international speech contests. So when you listen to a speech and there's no purpose statement or clear objective stated or explicitly stated for this particular speech, you can just pick out from the four and use that as a scaffold and parameter of the effectivity of the speech. Am I currently effective in informing you about evaluation? And that's that for if the purpose of the speech was met. Next, was the message clear? So any and all forms of speeches ultimately has a message. As a speaker, our role is to have the audience bring home a message. For they have to have a gain. What's in it for the audience? Why do they have to listen to us? Even the humorous speeches has to have a message. So then we have to understand, was the message clear? Or were there too many messages in the span of 5 minutes? And that's one thing that you can also look into. Next, were the stories effective? So as we all learned from the sessions previously that has also been brought to us by PICPA Toastmasters Club, we have to share stories. And there are effective ways of sharing stories. So as an evaluator, you have to know if the stories being shared as an example are effective enough to meet the purpose and to support the message. And that's just it for the content. We shouldn't tell the speaker to not to change the story again, because that story, the events of the story are their own. We just have to guide them on how to make it effective in supporting the message and the purpose of the entire speech. And that's basically it for the content. So now we proceed with the O, or organization. So first thing, we look at the organization. Was the speech flow smooth? What was the organizational style that the speaker used? Was it past to future, past, present, future? Were there signposts, or did the speaker use signposting to make sure it was organized? And by signposting, first idea, second idea, third idea. Was it consistent? and effective to make sure that we are able to understand. It was smooth, it was very fluid, and there was no back and forth movement between points. Second thing, was it easy to follow? Now, here's a secret, friends and fellow Toastmasters. I personally have an attention span of a goldfish. I cannot sit through long hours of lecture. Even a 10-minute speech would not be short enough for me to really focus on for the entire 10 minutes. But what's important about a speech is, was it organized in a way that if I got distracted for a second or so, I wouldn't get lost altogether already? If I were, say, for example, to look at anyone who enters the room and then return my attention back to the speaker, would I still be able to catch up on what he or she was discussing on because it was so organized? That's just it. Was it easy to follow? Didn't we go beat around the bush and get lost in the jungle of words altogether? And third, were there effective transition aids? An organized speech always has an effective transition aid. So, as I said earlier, posting is one of an effective transition aid. Long pauses between paragraph is a good transition aid. Stylistic devices such as the use of a controlling metaphor. In the case of Toastmaster Jot's speech, WUSA, the use of WUSA was a good way to end a thought and then begin a new one. That is an effective transition aid. So that's all that we have to look out for the organization. Was it fluid, and does the speech flow smoothly? Was it easy to follow? And were there effective transition aids? If any one of these are missing, then it might be a point for recommendation. Next, we are done with the content. Next, we just finished the organization. So next in line would be the delivery. So for the delivery, we have to look out for these three. Was there coherence in the content and delivery? What do we mean by the coherence between the content and the delivery? If the content was showing a joyous moment, was the delivery joyous as well? Or was it bland? Next, was it able to complement the content? Ultimately, friends and fellow Toastmasters, our delivery is there to complement the content. And how does it do that? Did the speaker use effective pauses for emphasis? Did the speaker use change of voices and tones? Did the speaker use purposeful, meaningful gestures instead of half gestures, like what I've been doing a lot this entire talk so far? Was this use of stage done correctly enough to portray scenes in the speech? These few things is actually a way to complement already the powerful content of a speech. And third, was it clear? Was it clear why the speaker had to pause between a phrase for emphasis? Or did it seem like that pause meant like that the speaker forgot something? Was it clear why the speaker was pacing through the stage? Was it clear why the speaker used this particular gesture? Basically, if the delivery is clear enough to speak a message in and of itself, our actions, our gestures is also a way of communicating. Even without words or very few words, gestures and facial expressions are powerful enough to convey emotions, to convey a thought. So that is how we basically see if it was clear enough. Okay, so basically that's it. The content, the organization, and the delivery. And now we know what to take note of. We know what things to be wary of or to try to take note of during an evaluation or while we are preparing for an evaluation. Now, even if you have all the points together and you feel like it's complete, your evaluation speech would not be effective if we ourselves cannot organize. So we talk about content organization and delivery. So all of the things I discussed earlier was on the content of an evaluation speech. Now we proceed to our organization. How do we organize our speech? Now for an evaluation, especially in the contests, we have to organize twice. First and most important is organizing your notes. Because then after the speech, we only have 5 minutes to prepare and we don't have the luxury of time to decode our notes and decode our handwriting. So you have to have your own style and master it and basically organize how you write down your notes already so that you just have to organize the speech during the 5 minutes of silence in a contest. And the same is true for a speech or a meeting or a general meeting. We don't have the luxury of time because the only time we have to prepare is in while other speakers are delivering their speeches, the relaxation portion, or even while the GE and table topics evaluators are delivering their speeches. We do not have the luxury of time to still decode our handwriting. Okay, so how do we organize our notes? Here's the thing. Let me say it out now. The best way of organizing your notes is the way you're most comfortable with. So again, the best way of organizing your notes is the way you're most comfortable with. But if you don't have a comfortable style yet, I have a few things that I'd like to share with you this afternoon that might help. So I have 3 suggested strategies. These 3 are what's been helping me through, and I hope it does the same for you. So first is a commendation recommendations, and I'll show you that later on. Next, COD and speech structure. And third is a good, better, best. And we'll take these on one by one. So I think this is the most common or most popular form of organizing our notes, the commendations and recommendations. You list down all the commendations on the content, organization, and delivery and all the recommendations. And then when it's preparation time, you just have to pick out top three, and that's it. So that's why this is the easiest and basically, yes, it's the easiest form and quickest form of organizing our evaluation notes. But this isn't the main format that I particularly use. The second one is the format that I use. It's the one that I mentioned earlier, COD and speech structure. So how I do this is that on the left side of the paper, I write down COD. And then I write down the strong and the weakest points for the content, strong and the weakest points for organization, and strong and the weakest points for delivery. Here, on the right, it's not just introduction. I wasn't able to put in everything there. It's an introduction, recommendation, and closing. So basically, how I'm going to structure my speech in itself is written on the right side of the paper. It gets complicated, but it works for me. As I said earlier, the best way to organize your notes is what works for you. A lot of people don't understand this format, but it's the best way that works for me. It worked for me in the contest. It worked for me in every meeting. So it might just work for you. So again, all the points that we discussed earlier is on the left-hand side. And then the right-hand side is immediately the introduction, recommendations, and conclusion. Now, why do I put the introduction, recommendation, and conclusion? Because I have a habit of using the speaker's introduction as my own introduction. So however the speaker started his speech, I write it down in the introduction. How the speaker ended his speech, I write it down in my conclusion. And I try to find ways and means of integrating the speech into my transitioning into the recommendation. And that's what I put in the middle. And that's basically how this format would work. Now, if you notice, the first 2 formats I said, commendations and recommendations. Now, a lot of the beginner evaluators find it hard to evaluate tenured speakers because they spend most of their time looking for something wrong in the speech. And that's just that. Not all speeches has something wrong with it. Say, for example, you're evaluating a world champion. How dare I look for something wrong in that speech? Sometimes it's just that it was done impeccably. But there will still be room for improvement based on your perception. And if that's the case, if you feel like there's nothing much for the speaker to improve on, or if you think there was nothing wrong with the speech, then I think the third format would do you well. Good, better, best. As the saying goes, good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good is better and the better best. So that's just it. Good, better, best. Using the COD things to look out for. What are the good things? What are the better things? And which are the best things? And use that as a scaffold for your evaluation. You can just simply tell the speaker, your organization was good. But I believe if you do this, it becomes a best form of organization for your speech. Good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good is better and the better best. There will always be a room for improvement. And I think we've covered organizing our notes. So again, commendations or recommendations is the first suggestion. Second, my way, which is quite complicated, COD on the left side, speech structure on the right side. Third, good, better, best. But ultimately, whatever is most comfortable for you, do it. Next. Now, it's good to remember, no, not good. It's best to remember that evaluation is still a speech. Especially here in Toastmasters, evaluations are still speeches. So we organize our notes. Now we have to organize our speeches. And how do we organize our speeches? Simple. It has to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, just like any other speeches out there. Here are a few key things that I'd like to emphasize on. First is the introduction. What do we do in the introduction? As I said earlier, I have a tendency of using the speaker's introduction as my own introduction as well. And why do I do that? It's to be impactful. If the speaker started their speech with a bang, I'm going to start mine with a bang just the same. I have to have an impact, or you have to have an impact at the very beginning of your evaluation speech, because then you're able to grab attention, not just of the speaker, but of the audience. And that is key as well, especially in the contests. Second is personal. In your introduction, right till the end, you have to be personal with the speaker. Therefore, even if, say for example, in the contest, you're in a huge stage, you have to start your speech looking at the speaker and not the audience. One more key thing of how we can make our evaluations personal, and that is to use the first person point of view. Because as I said earlier, your evaluations would be based on your perspective. You are speaking for you and not the audience. So, first person perspective, I as an audience, I as a recipient of your speech. All right. So again, just that. Your introduction must be impactful right from the get-go, and you have to start it on a more personal note, speaking directly to the speaker. Now, there's a whole lot of debate amongst our mentors here of whether or not we can do away with the niceties. If we can do away with good afternoon, Toastmasters, so and so, good afternoon, this and that. If you are short on time, yes, you may. Anyway, you're already speaking in a first person perspective, and you've already started your speech with an impact and greeted the speaker himself or herself. Everything else you can do away with. All right, next. I'd like to share with you the 3 E's, and this is how I organize my evaluations per paragraph. And what is the 3 E's? First is the emphasized point. When we deliver our evaluation speeches, we already have the points that we looked out for, that we picked out in our notes and the like. It's best to start that point with that emphasized point. Instead, say for example, you want to commend the speaker on his or her introduction. Instead of starting off with, what got my attention and what got me interested, Toastmaster so-and-so, is your introduction. We can start off with an emphasized point, simply by saying, you had a good introduction. The very first phrase that comes out of your mouth for that paragraph is the point that you are trying to emphasize. So that's that. Start with your emphasized point. Lead on with your explanation. Explain why you want to emphasize on this point. Explain why the introduction was good. Now, here's most of the time, a lot of the evaluators miss out on spending time on the explanation, on the commendations. When I first started evaluating, I wanted to butter up and grease up the speaker and flatter him or her, make him or her feel good. So I said a lot of flowery words. It was a garden full of flowers. But it was a garden with just that, flowers and no roots. I said a lot of commendations. I said a lot of nice things. But the speaker would just leave the room flattered, but not remember what the good things actually are, or might not even understand why I thought they were good. It's very important, friends and fellow Toastmasters, that when we deliver commendations or when we give strong points of the speaker, we have to explain why. Because ultimately, we want the speaker to keep that good work up. We want the speaker to understand why it's strong so that he or she remembers it and applies it more in his or her future speeches. So again, start off with your emphasized point, the point that you took on from your notes, then your explanation. And lastly, when important or when applicable, especially for the recommendations, give your example. Especially for the recommendations, as I said earlier. Now, when we recommend, we don't want to simply say, this could have been done better. An effective evaluation is when you lead by example. So how do we lead by example? By giving your own example of how to do it better. Say, for example, you want the speaker to improve on the organization of the speech. So you can just say for that paragraph alone, following the 3 E's, Toastmaster so-and-so, the first thing I'd like to recommend is organization. I noticed how you used a timeline of your life story as a basis for organization of the speech. But I sort of noticed in the middle, you started jumping back and forth between the past and the present, past and present. So the timeline sort of gets disrupted by inserting a few details from the past. So you can improve it by using signposting, for example. In the past, this was this, and now this is it. In the past, this was this, and now this is it. Using those words allows me to follow you clearly if the point or the story you're sharing is in the past or the story you're sharing is now. And that, friends and fellow Toastmasters, is an example of how we use the 3 E's, particularly for the recommendations. And it's more or less the same for the commendations still. Now, aside from using the 3 E's per paragraph to make your entire evaluation whole, there are still a few other tips and tricks of how you can structure your evaluation speeches. Some of the winning evaluations uses acrostics. Say, for example, if the speaker was talking about dreams, acrostic dreams. D, delivery was strong. R, I could remember you. You were memorable. E, you were ecstatic. But to better or to help you improve your speech, you may A, whatever A of a recommendation you might have for that speaker. And lastly, M, motivate me more, but never forget to dream. That's an example of an acrostic. Basically, how you feel or what you feel is right for the speaker, you can do that. Again, ultimately, our goal is to help the speaker improve. You can, if the speaker used acrostics, you can use the same acrostics. If the speaker used a unique stylistic device, for example, the speaker used a sensual stylistic device, talking about what you see, what you hear, then you can use that as well. What I saw, what I heard. And basically using how the speaker structured his speech as a scaffold of how you structure your speech. And then there's a coherence between the speaker and you as an evaluator. But generally, that's a general idea of how we can make sure all our points come across, all our points are taken and understood by the speaker. All right. I failed to add it in the slides. My apologies. I failed to add it in the slides. The most important way of structuring our evaluation speech. I feel the need to emphasize this, although I'm pretty sure we all know. Start and end with the positives. It's, as distinguished Toastmaster Ernie likes to call it, it's a kiss, kick, kiss principle. We give the commendations, provide the recommendations, and end up with the good things. Now, there are also times when a speaker summarizes everything that is said early on towards the end. That could be if you want to make sure that the speaker is able to remember everything that you just shared. That could be one of the ways to do so. But it's not necessary. Especially if you're short on time, don't rush through your ending. And this is particularly for the contests. If the light is already red and you haven't wrapped up or you haven't given a summary yet, you can do away with your summary and just go into your strong conclusion. Do not rush your ending just so you can insert that summation. Summation as a part of the criteria doesn't just mean you summarizing everything that you said. It's summarizing the speech as a whole, and you can have a powerful closing to summarize that speech as a whole. Right? And I think that's basically it. If you ask me, if I have a long list of commendations and recommendations, how do I pick? I just pick the top 2 commendations for the start, 2 or 3 recommendations for the middle, and the best of them I save for last. And basically, that's that for how we structure our speech. Friends and fellow Toastmasters, again, I'd like to emphasize this. We speak from the heart. The third thing that we need to be a credible evaluator is the heart. So speak from the heart. Speak with a genuine intention to help a fellow Toastmaster, be it in a meeting or even in the contest. Speak genuinely from the heart with the intention to help. And our delivery would actually follow. You can never go wrong with a beautiful, meaningful smile when you deliver your evaluations. You can never go wrong with being a warm person when you deliver your evaluation. I particularly have a strong personality. I teach college students, and I've gotten the feedback, or I've heard from a lot of them, that they feel nervous when I'm around because of my aura. But when I deliver my feedback, and I just know this because some of the general evaluators told me, and after the contest I got the same feedback, that I smile, and the smile becomes welcoming. And I try to keep that up. And I think this is one thing that I'd like to share. No matter how beautiful your words are, they become meaningless if your face doesn't show that genuineness and that friendliness. So speak from the heart with a genuine intention to help, and make sure your face shows the same way. And last but not the least, before I end this entire talk and before we get into evaluations this afternoon, believe in yourself so that the speaker believes in you. You have to believe that the points that you're sharing with the speaker is correct, that the points you're sharing with the speaker is valuable. Believe in what you know. Believe that you know enough to give feedback. Believe that you are credible enough to give feedback so that the speaker believes in you. Do not second guess yourself, because the moment your vice president of education chose you to become an evaluator, or the moment he chose you to become the evaluation speech contestant, somebody else out there already believes in you. And so what's left there is for you to believe in yourself. Again, believe in yourself so that the speaker believes in you. And I think that wraps up our entire talk on evaluation this afternoon. And we still have a lot of time for questions, discussions, and practices for our evaluations. I hope I shared something of value with you this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing the evaluations that come next in the program.